Before the rumors, before military silence, before fans started asking what Sehun could become outside the shadow of EXO, he was first introduced to the world as something almost dangerously simple. A face, not a scandal, not a loud personality, not the member who needed to dominate every interview. Sehun arrived with the kind of visual impact K-pop understands immediately. Sharp jawline, cold eyes, tall frame, and a silence that made people stare harder instead of looking away. In an industry built on noise, he became famous partly because he did not seem desperate to be heard. Sehun was born in Seoul in 1994, long before he became the maknae of one of the biggest boy groups in Korean pop history. His path into entertainment had the almost mythical quality idol stories love to repeat. A young boy spotted by SM Entertainment, pulled toward training, polished for years until childhood became choreography, discipline, and cameras. By the time EXO debuted in 2012, Sehun was still young, but the machine around him was already enormous. And that is the strange thing about debuting in EXO. You do not simply become an idol, you become a piece of architecture inside a global fantasy. Every member has a role. Every glance is analyzed. Every mistake can become a headline. For Sehun, the role was clear almost from the beginning. The handsome youngest member, the cool visual, the quiet one with a presence that looked effortless. But effortless is a dangerous illusion. Behind that calm face was years of training, comparison, and pressure. He had to dance cleanly, rap with confidence, stand beside older members with stronger voices, brighter variety skills, and louder public identities. He was not only competing with other idols, he was competing with the image people had already created for him. Because when you are called beautiful too early, people sometimes stop asking what else you are. They frame you, they freeze you, they turn your face into your job. And Sehun's face became powerful. Fans loved the icy aura, the controlled expressions, the way he could stand at the edge of a stage and still pull attention like gravity. Brands loved him because he looked expensive. Cameras loved him because he needed very little movement to create a moment. But love like that can also become a cage, because it teaches the public to admire the surface before listening to the person beneath it. So Sehun's early fame was never only about talent, it was about projection. Fans projected mystery onto his silence, luxury onto his posture, confidence onto his restraint. Even his quietness became part of the product. Was he shy? Was he guarded? Was he simply trained to reveal less than people wanted? That question followed him for years, because Sehun did not rise like a storm. He rose like a perfect image. And perfect images always come with one cruel problem. Everyone wants to look at them, but not everyone remembers to ask what they cost. Then EXO became too big for Sehun to remain just the quiet boy at the edge of the frame. At first, his role looked almost simple. He was the youngest, the visual, the one fans screenshot during music videos because one expression could feel colder than an entire scene. But as EXO grew, that simplicity turned into something heavier. Because when a group becomes a phenomenon, every member stops being only a person. They become a symbol inside the machine, and Sehun's symbol was perfection. During EXO's peak years, the group did not move like a normal idol act. They moved like an empire. Albums sold in massive numbers, concerts became rituals, fan chants sounded less like support and more like a declaration of power. For millions of fans, EXO was not just music. EXO was youth, obsession, loyalty, fantasy, and war. To love them was to defend them. To follow them was to join a world where every comeback felt like an event. Inside that world, Sehun stood out by doing less. That was his strange power. He did not need to be the loudest vocalist. He did not need to own every variety show. He did not need to explain himself in long speeches. His presence worked through restraint, a glance, a turn, a pose in the back of the formation, a sudden center moment where the camera found him and the entire mood changed. In songs like Love Shot, that power became impossible to ignore. The choreography was sleek, dangerous, almost arrogant. The styling was expensive. The atmosphere was mature, darker than the fresh-faced image fans remembered from EXO's early days. And Sehun fit that world perfectly. He looked like the member who did not have to chase attention because attention had already agreed to follow him. But that kind of fame is complicated. Because the more Sehun became known as EXO's perfect visual, the harder it became for people to see the smaller details. His growth as a performer, his confidence as a rapper, his stage control, his ability to hold a minimalist expression without looking empty. The public knew how to praise his face quickly, but not always how to describe his evolution deeply. Even EXO-SC, his subunit with Chanyeol, revealed a different side of him. The music was more relaxed, more stylish, more playful. It gave Sehun space outside the full group structure, space to appear less frozen and more casual, less like a statue, and more like a young man trying to breathe inside his own image. But even then, the question followed him. Was the audience hearing him or simply watching him? That is the burden of being beautiful in K-pop. Beauty opens the door, but sometimes it locks you in the room. Sehun's peak image was powerful because it looked effortless. He could sit front row at fashion events and seem born for luxury. He could appear in a music video for seconds and still become the moment fans replayed. He could say very little and still dominate the conversation. But behind that elegance was a harsher truth. The industry had taught people to consume him visually before they understood him artistically. And maybe Sehun knew that. Maybe that is why his silence always felt double-edged. It made him mysterious, but it also made him unreachable. It protected him, but it also allowed others to define him first. So when EXO stood at the top, Sehun was not invisible, he was everywhere. But being seen everywhere is not the same as being understood. Then came the kind of rumor that proves how fragile an idol's silence can be. It was not a career-ending legal scandal. It was not a confirmed confession. It was not even something Sehun built his public image around. But that is exactly why it mattered. Because for someone whose fame had always been wrapped in control, elegance, and distance, even an unproven rumor could become a weapon. In 2023, online chatter claimed that Sehun had a girlfriend who was pregnant. The story spread fast, not because the public had evidence strong enough to destroy him, but because the internet no longer waits for evidence before it begins a trial. Screenshots moved, comments multiplied. People who barely followed him suddenly had opinions. And once a rumor enters the bloodstream of fandom, denial does not erase it immediately. It only starts another argument. Sehun and his company denied it. The rumor was described as false, groundless, and serious enough for legal action. But by then, the damage had already revealed something deeper than the rumor itself. It revealed how people treat quiet idols. Because Sehun had always shown the public so little, the empty spaces around him became easy to fill. Some fans filled them with loyalty, some filled them with fantasy. Others filled them with suspicion. His silence, which once made him look mysterious and untouchable, suddenly became the thing people used against him. They asked, if he says so little, what could he be hiding? That is the cruel math of celebrity. The less you reveal, the more people invent. And for K-pop idols, rumors do not need to be true to feel dangerous. They only need to disturb the image. Sehun's image had been carefully built on cool perfection, handsome, controlled, stylish, quiet, loyal to the group, difficult to read. But perfection creates hunger. People want to crack it. They want to prove the flawless face is not flawless. They want the private life to be messy because it makes the idol feel less powerful, less distant, less protected. For fans, the rumor was not just gossip. It was an attack on a world they had defended for years. They rushed to protect him, to report posts, to repeat the denial, to insist that he was being targeted because he was famous and private. To them, the controversy showed how easily a man could be punished for things he never confirmed, never admitted, and never owed strangers in the first place. But outside the fandom, the reaction was colder. Some people did not care whether the rumor was true. They enjoyed the spectacle. They watched the panic, the denials, the fan wars, the way one sentence online could shake an image that had taken more than a decade to build. That was the real scandal around Sehun. Not proof, pressure. The pressure of being watched so closely that even silence becomes suspicious. The pressure of belonging to a group whose legacy is so massive that every personal rumor feels like it might stain something bigger than one member. The pressure of being loved as a perfect visual, then punished the moment the public imagines a private life behind that face. And maybe that is why the incident felt so ugly, because Sehun did not have to fall for people to test whether they wanted him to. They only needed a rumor, a headline, a whisper, a pregnancy claim moving through the internet like smoke. He survived it, but survival is not the same as being untouched. After that, the perfect image looked less like armor and more like glass. And then Sehun disappeared in the quietest way possible. Not because the public stopped caring, not because EXO stopped mattering, but because military service has a strange power over idol careers. It freezes them. It takes a face that fans are used to seeing under stage lights and places it somewhere unreachable, somewhere ordinary, somewhere time moves without cameras. For Sehun, that silence felt heavier than usual. He enlisted as the final EXO member to begin mandatory service, and by the time he completed it, the group had reached a symbolic turning point. The military era was over. The long waiting room was finally supposed to close. For fans, that should have felt like relief. EXO was whole again. The missing piece had returned. But Sehun's return also reopened an old question. Who is he now? Because the boy who debuted as the youngest visual of EXO is no longer a boy. He is a man in his 30s, standing at the edge of a second chapter. The cold beauty that once made him look untouchable is still part of him, but it cannot carry the entire story forever. K-pop changes fast. New idols appear every month. New faces become the obsession. New fandoms rewrite the rules of attention. A visual icon cannot simply return to the same mirror and expect it to reflect the same world. That is what makes Sehun's current image so interesting. He is not ruined. He is not disgraced. He is not a fallen star begging for forgiveness. His tension is quieter than that. He is caught between legacy and identity. On one side, he will always be EXO's maknae, the elegant one, the member whose silence became part of the myth. On the other side, he still has to prove that there is more behind the myth than a beautiful face and a famous group name. Fans already believe there is. They remember the shy humor, the loyalty, the awkward warmth that appeared when the camera stopped demanding perfection. They remember EXO SC, the fashion events, the acting attempts, the moments when Sehun looked less like an idol statue and more like someone trying to grow inside a role people had written for him too early. To them, his quietness was never emptiness. It was protection. But the broader public is less generous. To casual viewers, Sehun can still be reduced to one sentence: EXO's handsome visual. That label is both a crown and a trap. It keeps him recognizable, but it also keeps him contained. If he returns only as the silent, beautiful member, people will say he never changed. If he tries to reveal more, people may question whether they wanted that version of him at all. That is the cruel part of being loved for an image. The public demands growth, but punishes unfamiliarity. Now, as EXO moves toward another chapter, Sehun stands in a rare position. He does not need to rebuild from scandal. He needs to rebuild from being underestimated. He needs to turn attention into voice, nostalgia into momentum, beauty into authority. The challenge is not whether people will look at him. They always have. The challenge is whether they will finally listen. Maybe this is why his story feels unfinished in a different way from other idols. There is no dramatic collapse to close the book, no single headline that explains everything. Instead, there is a slow question hanging over him. After years of being watched, can Sehun become fully seen? Because being seen is not just about cameras. It is about being understood without needing to shout. It is about stepping out of the perfect frame and letting people meet the person, the frame protected, limited, and sometimes erased. Sehun was once EXO's beautiful silence. Now the real question is whether that silence can finally become a voice.